Well, Cosby survivor Lili Bernard and Caroline Heldman are here. They were both in the courtroom when Cosby was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in state prison. They've been among the most vocal supporters of sexual assault victims, and they're here this morning for a new fight. Hi, guys. We're going to get to Cosby in a second. We're going to start about your new fight, because I want to start on a positive, powerful note, even though that's positive. The ERA.
Yeah, girl.
ERA, Equal Rights Amendment. We don't have it ratified here. Tell people what the ERA is and why you guys are so passionately involved in it now.
I'm going to defer to the political scientist professor. Go, girl.
So the Equal Rights Amendment simply is an amendment to the Constitution that says that you can't discriminate based upon sex. And 84% of Americans think we already have this, and over 90% support it. So it is a little absurd that we don't have this in the Constitution. And we've bent the 14th Amendment, we've bent a lot of the other amendments to include women, but at the end of the day, we actually don't have the highest level of protection because we're not in the Constitution.
So we're not in the Constitution. So for people at home that don't understand, it takes 38 states to ratify the ERA. We have 37. Illinois just passed. This all started back in 1982. This is how long ago this all, Carter tried to get this passed and it didn't pass. What are you guys doing to get that one more state to ratify the Constitution? We have states like Utah, Arizona, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and Virginia. Not California, but
California passed it.
Yes.
We're, obviously a progressive state who cares about women's rights. But we are focusing on Arizona and we are focusing on Virginia. You're right, it only takes one more state and then it will work its way through the courts and we will amend our Constitution and women will get the highest level of protection now, hopefully, finally, 100 years after it was initially proposed, and yes, 40 years after it ended up not passing 38 states.
And you have one of the best, probably, images in person to get behind that is you.
Oh.
And I'm going to say that because you were one of the, first accusers of Bill Cosby. And we have some video of you guys, and people remember this, of the two of you walking out of the courtroom that day, crying when he was found guilty. What was that all like for you, Lili?
Ooh, it was visceral and deeply emotional. Obviously, it was a moment that I never thought would happen, and I was so grateful for Caroline's presence. She was there at the courthouse with me 3 times for the first trial, the second trial, and the sentencing hearing recently. So it was just an outpouring of emotion, of gratitude.
Well, you came forward, and in this environment, we're going to get to Brett Kavanaugh's hearing and Dr. Ford in just a second, but for victims of sexual assault to come forward, that kind of reaction shows what a long haul it takes on someone and the stamina you have to have to see through the fight. So what do you say to people who are thinking about saying something but just say, I don't have it in me?
Yeah, I would say to reach out to a sisterhood of other survivors that will help empower you, and amazing things can happen. I'm still astounded at what happened just a week and a half ago, this amazing convergence of feminine strength against masculine power, because the same week that my mega mogul celebrity serial rapist was rightfully cuffed and convicted, we had a Supreme Court now newly confirmed Justice Brett Kavanaugh in a hearing facing credible allegations of sexual assault. And my heart is with Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. I stand in solidarity and belief with her, just as I did with Dr. Anita Hill, whom I think was in a hearing the same month, I think it was October 1991, that serendipitously Bill Cosby last drugged and sexually assaulted me, and she was in a hearing against, of course, Clarence Thomas, now a presiding Supreme Court justice, on allegations of sexual harassment. So amazing things can happen, spectacular things can happen when you find the courage to speak out.
Well, people will say that she had courage, Dr. Ford, to come forward, but nothing happened. What are your response to that? I mean, whether it's true or not true, I have to, both sides have their own truths, but people would say, look at what she went through, death threats, her family, and both sides, him as well. Is it worth it?
It depends. So Lili and I work with a lot of survivors. We're part of this kind of survivor sisterhood, which also includes male survivors of sexual violence. For some women and men, it's not worth it to come forward simply because of the price they will pay. And I don't know, Dr. Blasey Ford and the other women who've come forward, I don't know if it's worth it for them, but I can tell you that their sacrifice means an awful lot to other survivors. But for some survivors, it's simply not worth it, because because they'll lose their job, they'll lose their livelihood.
They don't have the resources.
Exactly.
And we said, if Dr. Ford, it talked about credibility on it, she was so credible, but what if it was just a woman who was a house cleaner who came and, you know, tried to take on Brett Kavanaugh, Judge Kavanaugh at the time? She wasn't credible enough. So a lot of women are too afraid because they don't have the resources.
But speaking of the working class, I know that people who are in a more empowered position, such as Dr. Ford, do actually impact the working class, because I have been on so many occasions in restaurants. Recently I was at a restaurant and about 7 of the workers, the bell people, you know, the bus boys and women, they came to me into here speaking Spanish because I speak Spanish. They know that I'm a native Cuban, and were thanking me for the example that I gave them on television and speaking out, that empowered them, you know, to speak out against their rapist. So
Well,
it crosses socioeconomic boundaries.
both sides. I know you can breathe now after Bill Cosby was convicted, but now his attorneys want to appeal and say he had too hard of a sentence for what he deserved. What are your thoughts on that?
That it was a slap in the wrist.
Slap on the wrist.
The sentence was a slap in the wrist. Although it was the maximum that the judge could hand out, it was still a slap in the wrist in comparison to the trauma that he has inflicted upon dozens and perhaps hundreds of women for decades. So it was a slap in the wrist. And all of his appealing is just going to be for naught, because it's just a buffoonery of excuses that they just...
63 women have come forward, and we all know women who have not come forward who are Cosby survivors. So when Lili says it's perhaps in the hundreds, I mean, this is a man who every probation or every parole hearing is going to have almost 100 people there saying, this is what he did to me.
Did you have any doubt
Any doubt about what?
that he would be convicted?
I did, because less than 2% of rapists are ever convicted. So yeah, I was surprised that someone as once beloved and revered as Bill Cosby could be found guilty. That was outstanding. But it's for me, it's not just a healing moment and closure, but also I really do have now like a renewed faith in humanity that women's voices are finally being believed, and that's an amazing thing.
So that goes full circle to what you guys are doing now, the ERA. You have a renewed sense that women will come forward. And what about for this next election, for the midterms?
Well, for the midterm elections, we've seen about a 400% increase in women running for office. So I think when you have an election with a president with 22 sexual violence allegations, and you have what just happened with Kavanaugh, where a majority of Americans believe that we just put a sexual predator on the Supreme Court, then women know that we are not as valued as much. We know that our voices are not as valued as much. And so we are really pushing to get into the halls of power in order to change this. Because frankly, at the end of the day, we don't want to live in a patriarchy. We don't want to live in a society that doesn't value women as much as men.
And victims' voices and citizens' voices really matter. A phone call to a senator matters. Caroline led a tremendous campaign wherein we actually abolished the statute of limitations on rape prosecution. You guys had us here for our state of California. So votes matter and your voice matters. Phone calls to senators make a difference.
Well, Lili, your voice helped others come forward too. So we want to thank you, Caroline and Lili. Thanks for all your work, and we'll be right back. Or Alex, what do you got next?